Incredible moment. White woman calls cops on black teen. You won't believe who walks in next. Sarah sat on her small balcony, clutching her steaming mug of coffee, the rich aroma mingling with the crisp autumn air of Maplewood. It was supposed to be a peaceful afternoon, but her gaze was drawn across the street where chaos erupted in Karen's yard. The neighborhood was known for its tranquility, yet here was a scene that turned her stomach into knots. A frantic Karen, hands flailing, pointed a manicured finger at Malik, a young black teen waiting for a friend, backpack slung over one shoulder. Sarah's heart raced. This was just a misunderstanding. This was a ticking time bomb. As Karen shouted accusations that rang hollow in Sarah's ears, she felt her pulse quicken. She knew Malik's reputation, a dedicated student aspiring to do well for his ailing mother. Sarah had nurtured countless young minds, taught them empathy and integrity, yet here she sat, paralyzed. What if she intervened? Would her neighbors see her as the outlier of their tight-knit community? The judgment of others clawed at her, shackling her spirit. Before she could process how dire the situation truly was, her phone rang. A notification chimed in, alerting people to the impending arrival of police. Panic surged through Sarah, an icy grip around her chest squeezing tighter with every passing second. How could something like this happen in her perfect suburb? She glanced back at Malik, hands trembling in his pockets, a crumpled expression on his face. It shattered her heart. It was just a fear for his safety, but an instinct to protect a world she had always believed to be fair. Her mind spiraled as she weighed the choices before her. Say nothing and risk this injustice playing out, or risk everything she had built in her life to protect a boy who represented hope and possibility. It was just her career at stake. The consequences could ripple outward, fracturing the fragile balance of her community. Each second that ticked by felt monumental, intense pressure building within her like a coiled spring aching to snap. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The officer's squad cars rolled up, sirens silencing the neighborhood, and the tension exploded in palpable waves. Sarah's breath was shallow, trying to make sense of her next move. All she could hear was the frantic beating of her heart as she contemplated stepping out onto that precarious balcony. A suffocating jealousy toward Karen's arrogance burdened her. She had allowed fear to dictate her life, and now it threatened to snuff out Malik's dreams too. Would she let this moment slip through her fingers? Resolute, she took a breath, steeling herself for an impending confrontation. As all eyes remained fixed on the unfolding drama, Sarah's anxiety melded with a dawning courage. If she didn't speak up now, what would her silence say about her? A weighty silence fell, and the world seemed to shrink into that single moment. A decision loomed just ahead. Was it too late to create change? Could a single voice turn the tide, or would it be drowned out by the expectations that had so long governed her life? Sarah took a deep breath, the crisp air filling her lungs, grounding her just enough to push the chaos around her into the background. The sirens of the police cars still blared, but inside her head, it was as if time had slowed, all focus drawn to the indelible moment at hand. Standing at the precipice of her own moral awakening, she realized that the most significant transition she could make was not just for Malik, but for herself. She stepped onto the balcony, her heart thudding like a drum. While the eyes of neighbors turned toward her as though searching for a cue, a flicker of doubt surged within her. How could she challenge the status quo, the norm that had kept them all comfortably silent for too long? Could a teacher, someone whose days were filled with nurturing young minds, also be an agent of change in a world rife with injustice? Malik's eyes caught hers, wide and uncertain, glimmers of hope fighting against the shadows of fear that clung to his brow. Sarah felt a pull within her, a blend of duty and compassion swelling up, pushing her forward. "Hey! Wait!" she shouted, her voice slicing through the tension with a newfound clarity. The crowd turned, eyes shifted, and for the briefest moment she existed within that fragile bubble of action and consequence. Would she truly do this? Karen hesitated, eyes narrowing just enough to mask her surprise with irritation. Why are you defending him, Sarah? He's just a kid loitering in our neighborhood, she scoffed. Sarah's resolve hardened. Because he's not just a kid, he's a person with dreams and aspirations, just like every other student I know. You can't judge him based on the color of his skin or where he hangs out. The words flowed, propelled by a mix of fear, anger, and an undeniable urge to protect. Behind her, the subdued murmurs of the neighbors rose to meet her defiance, a strange wash of support that flickered like a candle in the wind. Yet doubts nibbled at her thoughts. What if this not only put Malik in danger, but also cost her everything? Her career, her standing in the community, her identity? But in that moment of confrontation, another realization surfaced. Her identity wasn't solely comprised of what her neighbors thought or the status of her job. It stemmed from her values, the lessons she preached, the integrity that she desperately wanted to instill in her students. The officers stepped out of their cars. They hesitated, taking in the scene before them the frantic accusations, the challenging voice of a teacher willing to speak truth to power. One officer looked at Malik, and then back at the unfolding drama. Ma'am, he called to Sarah, voice calm but firm, can you tell us what is going on? Her heart raced, a momentary pause crashing upon her. This was her chance not merely to defend Malik, but to challenge a narrative, to foster change, to demonstrate what she had always hoped to embody. Well, officer, I know Malik, she began, her voice steadier than she felt. He's an incredible student, and right now, as his community, we're failing him. Just then, a realization struck her, a spark of clarity about her purpose. This was not only about Malik, it extended to every student whose potential risked being undermined by fear and prejudice. A resolve crystallized in her mind, igniting a sense of urgency she hadn't experienced before. But as the officer turned to assess Malik with curiosity, the palpable tension in the air thickened like a fog, and Sarah could sense that this was just the beginning of a much larger battle, a personal revolution that would redefine her mission. The stakes had never been higher, and she knew a reckoning was on the horizon. What would you do if your child were facing the same situation? She asked Karen, vulnerability and pride swirling together. As the words hung there, unanswered, Sarah felt both fear and exhilaration in equal measure. Would she have the courage to keep pushing for change, to navigate through the complexities that would unfold? The moment quaked with possibilities, and behind her, she sensed the shift in the ground beneath her feet. The moment of truth was approaching, and she stood at the edge of a new path, ready to confront the challenges that lay ahead. What did it mean to really stand up for one's beliefs, to bridge the gap between silence and action? A storm was brewing, one that promised to reshape her reality forever. The officer's gaze lingered on Sarah, a flicker of recognition, understanding shifting his stance subtly. He saw her, not just as a teacher, but as a person willing to defend life against an overwhelming tide. It was in that moment she realized the full weight of her choice, and for the first time, she felt herself confront the ripple effect it could bring. Her heartbeat quickened with a heavy sense of responsibility. In a flash, she recalled the lessons she had imparted to her students, the importance of standing for what is right, the importance of compassion even against pressing adversities. Now, facing the judgment of the very community she had once tried to please, those teachings felt like an anchor and a storm at once. Karen stood frozen, the crowd's eyes bouncing between her and Sarah, puzzled over this unexpected confrontation. A ripple of uncertainty danced through the assembled neighbors. Would they align with the accusation against Malik, or would they support Sarah's audacity to speak out for a child they all knew, albeit vaguely? Why are you so eager to protect him, Sarah? Karen finally demanded, her anger flaring like a flame desperate for air. How many times have you actually talked to him? He's just a kid in trouble. Maybe you should try talking to him, Karen, Sarah countered sharply, each word punctuated with rising conviction. You might shock yourself with what you discover. It's not about where a person comes from, it's about who they strive to become. The officer shifted his stance, arms relaxing, taking in the back and forth like a spectator at a match. The atmosphere crackled, every breath was charged with tension. What if these words finally struck a chord? What if they planted a seed of understanding in the hearts of those watching? A small voice within her whispered for the deck to turn her way, for the world to finally acknowledge the often overlooked humanity in those too easily judged. As a silence fell, the heaviness of the moment sunk deeper into her bones. She had not merely fought for Malik, she had ignited a confrontation within herself, one that pitted her present feelings of self-doubt against the compelling desire for genuine change. A recognition washed over her. She could no longer simply fulfill the role of a teacher. She was ready to take on the mantle of an advocate. Around her, the expressions shifted, whispers ebbing into consideration. People began to murmur softly, some nodding, while others in their own solitude began to churn the weight of the moment in their hearts. Sarah felt a wave of something moving, a realizing that she wasn't alone in her beliefs. Perhaps, just perhaps, there were others who shared her vision for transformation. Sarah, the officer spoke again, this time softer. Let us start from the beginning. What happens next? In that decisive second, a door opened wide, revealing opportunities she had only ever fantasized about in the quiet of her classroom. Sarah inhaled deeply, bolstered by this chance not only to stand up for Malik but to redefine her role as an effective educator, an engaged community member. Let us create a space where voices like Malik's are heard, she said, a determination flaring behind her eyes. We can make it happen, but it starts now with this moment. We have to act. As she prepared to advocate for Malik, her mind raced with strategies, program ideas, outreach plans, ways to engage the community meaningfully. But in the periphery, she noticed Karen's face pale under the weight of collective scrutiny. Sarah knew that this confrontation would leave no one unchanged. Would she have the fortitude to follow this through, to not just champion Malik but also confront her own frustrations, fears, and biases? What did support and change really look like, and how hard would she have to fight for the truths she had always believed in? The walls, once insurmountable in her mind, appeared to crack as she took the next step forward, driven by an unmistakable urgency. But as she opened her mouth, prepared to speak truth into being, an unexpected figure approached, shifting the tension entirely. What if the ultimate test came not just from her friends and neighbors, but from those she had once considered allies? Would she still be as brave when faced with the very people willing to challenge her latest resolve? A man stepped forward, his presence commanding attention, cutting through the charged atmosphere like a knife. Dressed in a crisp blue blazer, he had an air of authority. His eyes, sharp and assessing, moved rapidly over the crowd until they found Sarah. Recognition flickered to life in his gaze, but then it quickly became obscured by a look of concern. Sarah, he called out, his voice steady yet low, as if he were trying to anchor her amidst the tumultuous waves of judgment crashing around them. Her heart raced, momentarily stalling in her chest as she recognized him, the school principal, Mr. Thompson, who had once applauded her innovative teaching methods and encouraged her passion for youth advocacy. The very ally she had hoped would support her resurgence in this pivotal moment now walked into the fray with an air of unease. "I'm sorry to interrupt," he said, his tone wavering slightly, "but it seems we have a complicated situation." "Complicated?" Karen shot back, her voice grating through the tension. "It's simple, really. This kid is trouble, and she's defending him." "Karen," Mr. Thompson interjected, raising a hand for calm. "I understand your concerns, and I promise we're going to look into this appropriately. But let us not forget we're dealing with real lives here. Malik deserves our attention, every child does." The crowd shifted restlessly, their perception of Sarah subtly morphing as Mr. Thompson spoke. She had hoped this intervention would help fortify her stand, but growing uncertainty gnawed at her. Would they trust him, or would her efforts now seem like a misguided crusade led by ill-conceived sentiment? "Malik isn't just a troublemaker," she asserted, her voice gaining confidence, solidifying into a faculty of will. "He's a student in need of guidance just like any other. I refuse to stand by while we label him before we understand him. We need to hear him, not judge him." Mr. Thompson's gaze flitted back to Sarah, admiration sparking behind the professional facade. She met his eyes, silently pleading for his endorsement. Was her stance surprising to him, or did he already believe in her potential for change? As the air hung thick with tension, Sarah could feel the walls of doubt threatening to close in again. Questioning her ability weighed on her. She was no longer just a teacher in her classroom, imparting lessons to eager minds. She was stepping into a broader landscape that demanded resilience and accountability. I understand this is difficult for everyone, Mr. Thompson continued, but we're in a moment of potential transformation. Sarah, are you prepared to lead this? Because if we're truly going to make a difference for Malik and for our school, your courage will be paramount. His words highlighted her dilemma. Was she equipped to bear the burden of that leadership? An acute awareness of her inexperience stirred uneasily within her. The gravity of his question settled heavily in the pit of her stomach, threatening to derail her determination. Of course, she began, but uncertainty crept through her. Was she ready to navigate not just Malik's world but the entirety of the biases and fears tethered to it? Then let us facilitate an open dialogue, Mr. Thompson said, urgency infused within his tone. It needs to come from a place of authenticity, of understanding. Sarah nodded, quickening her response. A fleeting thought blipped through her mental checklist. Had she truly stepped into a role she was ready to occupy? She focused back on the present, firming her resolve. Absolutely. Let us arrange a meeting. We'll bring Malik in, and I'll do my best to make his voice heard, she asserted, meeting both Mr. Thompson and the disbelieving eyes of the crowd. The gravity of that declaration hung in the air, but as Sarah wrestled with the anticipation of what the coming weeks might hold, she felt a strange mix of hope and apprehension. What she had set in motion would test more than just her advocacy. It would stretch into the uncomfortable territories of personal growth, collaboration, and innate biases. As uncertainty danced on the precipice, Karen crossed her arms tightly, determination written across her face. And how exactly do you plan to do that? By just talking? I hope you realize that words alone won't change anything. A challenge hung in the air, igniting a spark of anxiety in Sarah. The pressure mounted. Did she possess the capability to bridge the gap, to transform the hearts of those once close to her? Would she remain stalwart in the face of escalating opposition? With her heart racing, she knew the true test lurked right around the corner. Would she have the strength to transcend her own fears and forge a path into the unknown? The moment felt rife with critical possibilities, laying the groundwork for a confrontation that could either illuminate her journey or unravel the fragile web of hope she'd spun. What awaited her in those uncharted waters would determine how deeply she would rise or fall. The following day, Sarah sat at her cluttered desk, the remnants of yesterday's volatile exchange flooding her thoughts. She couldn't shake the weight of the crowd's scrutinizing expressions, nor the piercing challenge in Karen's voice. Was talking enough to pave the way for understanding? The responsibility pressed heavily upon her. As students shuffled into her classroom, their laughter echoed against the sagging walls, a sound that had once brought her solace. Today, it felt like a jarring reminder of the divide she intended to bridge. She caught sight of Malik's empty desk, a glaring absence that ignited a resolve within her. She pulled out a legal pad, scribbling notes in a desperate attempt to prepare her thoughts. Organizing her vision for the meeting she had promised was overwhelming. What do I want to communicate? She muttered to herself, each scribbled word punctuating the swell of doubt. But a flicker of empowerment surged through her. She could channel this uncertainty into purpose. The door swung open with a creak, and in walked Emily, a fellow teacher who had always been supportive but noticeably distant since the incident. Sarah sensed hesitation coiling in the air, as if Emily was gauging how much of her allegiance remained. Hey, Sarah. I heard about yesterday. You handled it well, Emily said slowly, her words wrapped in caution. Thanks, but it felt like it spiraled out of control, Sarah admitted. She could feel the stark difference between the camaraderie of nearby staff members and the isolation she now bore. I just hope I can make a difference. Emily leaned against the doorframe, her expression careful yet genuinely curious. What's your plan for Malik? It's going to take more than just meeting with him. Are you ready for that? The question jabbed Sarah like a needle, as if it piercing through her planned confidence. I realize that. But I think we need to give him a voice, let everyone hear what he has to say. And do you think everyone is willing to listen? You're going to have to prepare for resistance, Emily said, her eyebrows furrowing as concern danced in her gaze. There it was again, the weight of reality pressing against her idealism. Yet, she felt that knowing the potential for resistance was the first step toward effectively addressing it. Sarah straightened, a sense of determination solidifying within her. Maybe I'm not just advocating for Malik anymore. Maybe I'm standing up for something bigger, she reflected, her smile tentative but eager. If I can gather enough support, if I can show them that change is possible, they might just listen. Emily's posture relaxed a fraction, her arms now uncrossed as hope flickered in her gaze. You're right. People are capable of change. But you have to help them confront their biases head on. You might have to challenge them in a way they're not used to. The thought of confronting the crowd again sent a shiver down Sarah's spine. She realized that every member of that crowd, herself included, held biases that influenced their perspectives. How could she illuminate others when she struggled to illuminate her own shadows? Determination surged in her veins. Then I'll be ready. I need to prepare a framework for that discussion. Let us create space for them to confront their own assumptions about Malik. As the conversation unfolded, ideas coalesced into action plans. They began brainstorming. This meeting would require not merely words, but a nuanced integration of experiences, real stories, real feelings articulated. It was liberating yet terrifying to consider an invitation for true dialogue. Yet, as they spoke, Sarah sensed the pendulum swinging away from her vision. What if this meeting turned into a platform for more accusations, more hatred? The risk loomed like a shadow over her ambitions. Throughout the rest of the day, her mind churned with ideas, but also with the gravity of what lay ahead. Would she be able to guide the crowd toward understanding? The fear of failure gnawed at the edges of her confidence. As the day's lessons came to an end, Sarah felt the delicate balance of hope and dread resting heavily on her shoulders. She understood now that action was necessary, yet each decision had to be careful, strategic, and deeply introspective. The gathering approached with quiet ferocity, an intentional space both frightening and full of potential. Would it end in unity or discord? With stakes rising, Sarah slipped into her home, the hallway echoing her fears and ambitions. Malik's fate was now entwined with hers, and she resolved to face whatever awaited. As the night drew on, she felt the stirrings of an undeniable truth. Transformational moments are seldom comfortable. In that realization, she knew a confrontation awaited her not just with others, but within herself. Who would she have to confront in the pieces she was yet to uncover? The true journey of leadership was just beginning, and it was far more complex than she had anticipated. Unraveling her own biases might be the key to uncovering not just the courage needed for Malik, but for her own redemption as well. Would she find the strength necessary for this evolution? Sarah's alarm blared, shattering the tranquility of the night. She groaned, the weight of her thoughts dragging her back into dreamless awareness. Today was pivotal. The meeting loomed on the horizon, a storm cloud gathering momentum. As she prepared herself, the familiar rhythm of her morning routine felt surreal, as if she were acting in someone else's life. Each brushstroke of her hair seemed to draw out the tension building inside her. A steaming cup of coffee barely registered as she sipped, lost in the reverberating echoes of yesterday, the hostile voices, the disbelieving glances. In that moment of solitude, Sarah questioned everything. Did she truly have the resolve to usher in this discussion without losing herself? Her heart raced. Arriving at school, she found herself wandering the halls, a ghost among living history, memories of laughter shared and lessons taught. This time, they felt hollow. It wasn't just Malik's absence. It was the fear of contention looming in the air, which clung to her like fog. In her classroom, the scraps of paper littered her desk like unmade beds, reminders of chaos that echoed the state of her own psyche. She took a deep breath, swallowed the unease, and turned to her lesson plan. Instead of following the curriculum, she opted for a different strategy. If she was going to confront biases, she needed to first prepare her students for it. She arranged the desks into a circle, a physical manifestation of her intent for open dialogue. When her students trickled in, some were curious, others indifferent. They settled, the room buzzing with youthful energy mixed with underlying tension. Sarah welcomed them with a smile that she hoped conveyed sincere warmth, instilling trust. "Today's challenge is to step into someone else's shoes," she announced, her voice steady despite the internal quaking. "I want us to talk about perspectives, experiences, and prejudices." The students fidgeted, a swirl of disbelief and skepticism morphing into muted protest. She could feel the weight of their unspoken judgments. They didn't understand why they were being asked to interpret something so complex. "It's not just about Malik," she pressed on, determined. "It's about all of us. We all have assumptions, right? Let us explore them." A hand shot up. Jamie, a bright yet insistent voice in the back. "But why should we care? It's not like we're the ones being judged." Another layer of the challenge emerged. "Because, Jamie," Sarah countered, "we're all part of the same environment. We've all felt misunderstood or mistreated. It's a universal experience. Today is our chance to reflect on that." The group fell into a tense silence, and uncertainty rippled through the room. She felt every heartbeat counting down to the moment when silence might shatter into raised voices, accusations, or painful silences. One by one, stories surfaced, some deeply personal, others merely superficial, but each contribution woven into the discussion demanded her attention. Sarah watched them navigate their own biases, witnessing an evolution of personal development she hadn't anticipated. Yet her own fears tangled in the shadows of her anticipation. As the bell rang, calling an end to the period, Sarah sensed the air becoming charged with potential. The kids were still laughing, but the laughter rang differently now, tinged with newfound understanding. They weren't done yet. This had sparked something deeper, but the essential questions lingered. Would they carry this momentum into the upcoming meeting? Would their perspectives remain open, or was the risk of revert back to ignorance still imminent? Later, as she stared at the blank projector screen, her throat dry, dread seeped in. Was she traversing an uncharted path of confrontation with her colleagues? What if the circle closed on them as well, and understanding was lost amid raised voices again? Ready or not, the meeting beckoned, a crucible for Sarah's resolve. Would the courage she gleaned from the students hold firm against the professional storm about to unfold? As the clock ticked toward the meeting hour, an unsettling realization settled in her mind. Her leadership was to be tested, not just by the resolutions she sought for her students, but the visceral judgments she too had to confront. Her thoughts paused, a seed of doubt still lingered. What if her skills failed her when she needed them most? How could she lead others in this journey when she was still fumbling through her own darkness? The time had come to face not just the crowd, but the raw edges of her own past. Would she be able to shed the skin of her apprehensions, or would she remain caught in the turbulence? Sarah's heart raced as she clasped her hands together, the familiar motion providing minimal comfort. The meeting room was muted, the air heavy with unreleased tensions and unsaid opinions. The walls felt like they were closing in, and she could almost hear the echoes of her own doubts bouncing back at her. What if they don't listen? What if they push back hard? As she stepped inside, her colleagues occupied their seats, their expressions a mix of curiosity and skepticism. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Sarah could feel the weight of their gazes, heavy like stones. Would they see her as the passionate educator she hoped to be, or would they reduce her to just another voice in a sea of uncertainty? "Thank you all for being here," she began, her voice steadying with each word as she focused on what mattered. "I want to discuss how we can support our students more effectively, especially those who feel marginalized." Their faces shifted subtly. Some leaned in, others leaned back, crossing their arms defensively. Sarah swallowed hard, pushing down the wave of anxiety threatening to drown her resolve. "Remember Malik," she continued, making sure to keep her tone strong yet compassionate. "His experience in our school is not isolated. It's echoed through many students who feel overlooked. We owe it to them to create an inclusive environment." "Sarah, Are we really expected to change our entire approach because of one incident? Interjected Mark, a veteran teacher who had always resisted shifts in methodology. His tone dripped with skepticism, a challenge waiting to be met. A knot tightened in her stomach, but she had to hold her ground. Mark, it's not just about one incident. It's about acknowledging the systemic issues that predate us. If our students aren't feeling safe and heard, we can't baby them, he shot back, earning nods from a few in the room. They need to toughen up if they want to succeed in the real world. The counterargument hung heavily in the air, and Sarah felt the initial pang of fear resurface. She wrestled with it internally. Could she risk pushing back without losing the fragile trust of the room? Every time we dismiss their pain, we teach them that their experiences don't matter, she spoke, her voice rising slightly. Each one of our students has the right to feel seen, to feel valued. Can we really afford to ignore that? Do we really have the resources to change our curriculum? Another voice chimed in, and for every questioning remark thrown her way, a surge of self-doubt threatened to resurface. Even so, she focused on the collective energy, sensing an opportunity to lean into the discomfort. What if we reframe our curriculum into something more inclusive? She proposed, her brain racing to keep ahead of the discussion that was now thick with contention. What if we adapt our methods to include texts by diverse authors, diverse voices? By doing so, we invite all students in. We teach them empathy through the material. The room pulsed with tension, but a few faces shifted, interest sparked curiosity in their eyes. Sarah seized the moment to push further, to explore this shared space. Let us think beyond the texts. What if we also develop workshops? Training sessions that focus on recognizing our own biases? Can we commit to personal growth along with academic growth? Mark frowned but exchanged glances with another teacher who nodded hesitantly. But who's leading it? Are you volunteering? She took a deep breath, searching for confidence in the depths of her anxiety. I'd be willing to initiate this, but I need support. It can't be a solo mission. We have the chance to evolve together, but it requires commitment. As she spoke, a paradigm shift began to ripple through the room like an electric current, coaxing the hesitant into the conversation. They began to express fragmented ideas for development, forming a tapestry of transformative possibilities threaded through their shared doubts. Yet the unease she initially felt morphed into something a bit more contagious: hope. The bell rang, indicating the time was almost up. The conversation had sparked but remained flickering at the edges. Sarah felt a mixture of pride and anxiety as she sensed the room slowly uncoiling from its tense state. But as she prepared to conclude, unease re-emerged. Would they follow through? Would their ideas die before they saw the light of day? Let us think about this and reconvene. We can't let this be another fleeting moment, she urged, her voice gathering strength. We have the power to redefine our approach, to reshape our students' experiences. As they filed out, she caught a glimpse of determination from a few of her colleagues, but a lingering question permeated her thoughts: had she initiated a genuine dialogue, or merely postponed the inevitable backlash? Her mind swirled with the same fears that had haunted her before. Could she be the change she wished to see, amidst the shadows of doubt? Just then, her phone buzzed in her pocket, pulling her from her spiral. A message flashed. Are you ready for the next meeting? She paused, staring at the words and feeling a mix of exhilaration and dread. This was only the beginning, and if her courage could inspire even a small fraction, what might that mean for the next steps? The time would come when she would have to confront the deepest challenges ahead, ones that might either fortify her resolve or unravel her entirely. As Sarah walked out of the meeting room, the echoes of her own voice still resonated in her ears. A mixture of pride and apprehension coursed through her, lighting a fire beneath her resolve. The next steps loomed ahead like a vast, uncharted territory. Questions swirled in her mind. Had her words ignited a flame for genuine change, or had she merely momentarily placated the doubts of her colleagues? In the quiet of her office, Sarah stared blankly at the papers strewn across her desk. Each document held the potential for transformation, yet the weight of the conversation hung heavy in the air. She had taken the leap, but now, she needed to ensure that this wasn't simply a fleeting moment of enthusiasm. The initial excitement felt fragile, like a candle flickering against the wind. Flipping open her notebook, she began jotting down a list of actions she could take. Workshops. Proposals for inclusive texts. A collaborative approach. Each idea felt hopeful but distant, ghostly aspirations hovering just out of reach. Could she rally enough support to solidify her vision? Her mind returned to the faces of her colleagues, the skepticism etched into Mark's features, yet the shift in some of their expressions had been a faint glimmer of hope. They might not be convinced yet, but seeds had been sown. Seeds that she needed to nurture carefully. That afternoon, she decided to draft an email, a recap of their conversation, infused with her passionate desire for change. But with each word she typed, an invisible weight pressed down upon her. Would they see her enthusiasm as naivete or truly embrace the challenge of transformation? After countless revisions, Sarah finally hit send. The act felt like casting a lifeline into uncertain waters. Would anyone reach for it, or would it sink into silence? The absence of immediate feedback gnawed at her, but she knew better than to expect instant gratification. Growth, she reminded herself, was a process. It required patience and resilience. The following day, solitude became her refuge. She immersed herself in articles about inclusive educational approaches, drawn to case studies showcasing successful implementations in other schools. A thrill ran down her spine as she discovered new ideas to invigorate her own methods. With each page she turned, her confidence began to rebuild. She wasn't alone in this endeavor. Others had faced similar challenges and emerged victorious. Yet, a nagging voice in her mind twitched at her newfound momentum. What happens when you face resistance from those who should be allies? The same apprehension that loomed at the start of her journey returned. Would she, in time, become the target of backlash for daring to disrupt the status quo? As if sensing her internal struggle, a message appeared on her phone, snapping her from her spiraling thoughts. It was a reply from Laura, one of her colleagues. "I loved your ideas, Sarah. Let us grab coffee and talk more about the workshops." A wave of relief washed over her. Maybe this was the pushing hand of opportunity, gently guiding her forward. It wasn't just about her alone anymore. This could be a collective effort. Fueled by hope, she arranged the meeting. As she prepared, a small amount of excitement replaced some of her anxiety. Could this be the beginning of a collaborative spirit among her peers? As she approached the coffee shop, an array of possibilities fluttered through her mind, ideas that could materialize if they were willing to join her. But underlying that excitement was an undeniable apprehension. What if Laura was merely being polite? What if a day came when the conversations turned against her, when trust with her peers was tested by differing opinions? Sarah's thoughts raced as she entered the cafe. She spotted Laura at a table, her presence radiating warmth. Drawing in a deep breath, Sarah moved toward her, ready to engage in not just conversation but a potential partnership that could lead them toward deeper, transformative action. As she approached, a shadow swept over the table. The door swung open suddenly, and a figure entered, one who had been strangely absent from her thoughts, but now loomed large in the atmosphere. Mark stood in the doorway, surveying the room. The space felt electric. She could almost sense the tension before it fully formed. This was not just a casual encounter. It was the moment where the lines she had drawn would begin to blur. Facing the very source of her earlier doubts, she could feel her pulse quickening. Would this meeting debut a collaboration, or would it ignite a confrontation she wasn't prepared for? The answers lay just beyond their exchanged glances, waiting to unfold. As Sarah approached Laura's table, she felt the unmistakable weight of Mark's presence behind her, an uninvited specter in what was meant to be a hopeful meeting. The tension surged in the air, thickening around the tables filled with soft chatter and clattering mugs, trapping her in an unanticipated confrontation. "Hey, thanks for meeting me," Sarah greeted Laura, trying to anchor herself amidst the sudden turmoil. She felt Mark's gaze shift, testing her composure. His unexpected arrival could either serve as her ally or her greatest obstacle, depending on how he chose to engage. "Of course. I'm excited to hear more about your ideas," Laura replied, her tone encouraging. But Sarah could sense the undercurrent of uncertainty in her response, a hesitance that echoed the same doubts swirling in her mind. Sitting down, Sarah stole another glance at Mark. He was standing at the counter, his back turned as he waited for his coffee. A pang of doubt knotted in her gut. She had only recently begun to see glimpses of potential within her colleagues. But what if Mark's skepticism hadn't waned? What if he decided to openly challenge her ambitions right here, right now? Your email felt like a real call to action, Laura interjected, drawing Sarah's focus back to their conversation. I can see how passionate you are about this change. Sarah smiled, but her heart raced. I'm just hoping we can make a real difference. I think we can redefine how we approach our curriculum. It doesn't have to be the same old routine. Mark approached their table now, coffee in hand. He settled across from them, an inscrutable expression on his face. What's this about redefining anything, Sarah? He asked, his tone innocuous yet laced with a challenge. Taking a deep breath, Sarah squared her shoulders. We're discussing workshops and new texts that can integrate different perspectives. Her voice wavered slightly, but she pressed on. It's about making our content more inclusive. Mark raised an eyebrow, a smirk creeping onto his lips. Inclusive, huh? Sounds ambitious. You think everyone is going to be on board with that? An icy wave of apprehension rolled through her. I think we can't afford to ignore the realities of our students, she countered, her voice firmer. They deserve a curriculum that reflects their diverse backgrounds. Laura watched the exchange with wide eyes, silently supporting Sarah yet unsure how to intervene. Mark leaned back, crossing his arms, a defensive posture that radiated skepticism. But that's not what our parents expect, Sarah. What happens when we challenge the status quo? Change begins somewhere, Sarah retorted, feeling fiery determination surge through her. We can't be stagnant just because it's comfortable. We owe it to our students to help them see themselves in what they learn. A loaded silence hung over them. Mark's gaze bore into her, the air charged with unspoken thoughts. Sarah could feel every heartbeat echoing in her ears as she struggled to keep eye contact, to show him she was unyielding. Did she believe in her vision enough to withstand opposition? Where do you plan to start? Mark finally asked, tilting his head as if genuinely inquisitive. Just curious. Relief flooded her momentarily, providing a sliver of hope. I think we could organize workshops to share our perspectives, invite guest speakers with various experiences. Mark nodded thoughtfully, a shift in his demeanor that made Sarah's heart flutter, though her guard remained up. Was this the opening she needed, or just a ruse to undermine her later? I guess I'm interested in knowing what you think the pushback will look like, he said slowly, studying her. Because it's coming. Sarah's breath hitched. His candor scared her, but it also fueled her resolve. I can handle that. But we need to discuss it openly. That's the only way we can move forward. Mark's lips curled, half a challenge, half a begrudging admiration. The battle lines were drawn, but Sarah reveled in the tension. It meant she was entering uncharted territory, and that was exactly where she wanted to be. As they talked about the next steps, Sarah's mind raced. This meeting was an unexpected crucible, a trial of her ideas forged in the fire of differing opinions. With each exchange, her confidence solidified, gripping at her ambition like a lifeline, but she could hear the clock ticking in the back of her mind. What if Mark turned against her? A rift began to form, and now, the question loomed larger than ever. Would she remain undeterred, or would she allow fear of resistance to overshadow her newfound purpose? The coffee shop buzz faded into an ambient hum as Sarah weighed her options. The path stretching ahead held promise, but it was shrouded in uncertainty, one that she would have to navigate carefully. And as she considered the repercussions of their discussion, a single thought echoed louder than the rest: what would her own limits reveal about her mettle? Over the next month, Sarah transformed herself, not just professionally but personally. The workshops she initiated were met with both enthusiastic support and loud dissent. She wrestled with each feedback session, finding her voice growing stronger despite the criticisms echoing in her mind. Hours spent planning and adapting curriculum became her new reality, yet she never lost sight of why she embarked on this journey. Her experience advocating for Malik had ignited a passion that fueled her, pushing her to confront her own biases while demanding accountability from her peers. One afternoon, during a particularly charged workshop focusing on empathy and understanding diversity, Sarah stood at the front of the room when Mark raised a question that cut through the thick tension. Are we truly prepared to confront the biases we've allowed to fester in our own teaching? Can we admit how easy it's been for us to ignore the voices that don't represent us? It was a pivotal moment, a mirror reflecting her path. Instead of shying away, her heart surged with confidence. Yes, she replied firmly, her determination surging behind her words. It's crucial for us to own our accountability and do better. Our students deserve more than our comfort zones. In this way, Sarah developed not just strategies for teaching but also crafted a framework that encouraged uncomfortable conversations. She learned to be vulnerable, leveraging her discomfort as a teaching tool. Every pushback became an opportunity for growth, both for her and her colleagues. She began to grasp that personal fulfillment lay not just in being right, but in embracing the complexity of the conversation that always revolved around systemic injustices. At the final workshop of the month, as she scanned the sea of faces expecting resistance, she was met with nods of understanding and even vulnerability. Colleagues began sharing their struggles, the internal conflicts brought forth by their misconceptions and recognitions. I never thought of it that way, Laura admitted, her voice thick with emotion. And I'm ashamed of how I responded before. I see that I've been part of the problem, not the solution. Every shift in perception felt like another notch in her belt of achievements. It was no longer a solitary endeavor. The collective, albeit tentative, commitment to change manifested the very ideals she had long believed possible. The culmination of her hard work was beginning to shift the culture of their school towards one that welcomed nuance and discomfort in the pursuit of inclusivity. The Board of Education acknowledged her efforts, inviting her to share their progress with other educators. The moment she stepped into the conference room filled with anticipant faces from different districts, all eyes upon her as she began to speak about the voice of marginalized students, she felt unexpectedly steady. She had not only become an advocate for change within her school, but a beacon of hope for other educators seeking to forge new paths. They applauded, and she finally accepted that her voice mattered. Sarah had traded her fears for a commitment to being an agent of change, a mentor to those who felt like her lost and unheard. In reflecting upon her journey, she recognized that the lessons learned were far more expansive than she ever anticipated. The story of Malik had blossomed into a narrative of transformation that reached far beyond a single incident. It entailed courage, resilience, and empowerment. As she closed her presentation, she felt a sense of completion, a solidifying confidence grounded in the belief that personal growth and professional fulfillment are intrinsically linked. Thank you for allowing me to share my journey with you, she stated, her voice crackling with emotion. We've all had our blind spots, and acknowledging them is where we begin to redefine not just our curriculum, but ourselves. Together, we can cultivate an environment where every student feels seen, she concluded, pride swelling in her chest. Stepping away from the podium, she felt the wave of gratitude wash over her. It was recognition of not just her growth but of the collective potential that was now charting a new course. It was more than a remarkable achievement, it was the realization that she could be brave, compassionate, and a true ally for students like Malik, whose voices deserved to resonate in classrooms everywhere. This was the moment she had been gearing toward, and indeed, she had conquered her internal battles, emerging not simply as an educator but a transformative leader ready to embrace the complexities of the world outside her classroom walls. Sarah knew she would carry this momentum forward, ready to embark on further initiatives that reflected her newfound clarity and strength. She had achieved recognition, competence, and a sense of established position in both her professional life and in her community. Now, she was committed to fostering environments that resonated with empathy and understanding, because true education begins at the crossroads of courage and compassion. You've reached the end of this journey of personal and professional growth. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about Sarah's transformation. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to support this channel. Only true fans of personal overcoming stories know how important these actions are.